The sailor slippers pattern has definitely taken the knitting world by storm, and with gift knit season in full swing, you're probably planning on casting on a pair or 12 for your loved ones. But exactly how many pairs can you knit between now and Christmas? I've timed myself to the seconds so you can find out. Hi, I'm Nat. Welcome back to Tink and Frog Knits. Today I'm going to be knitting my second pair of sailor slippers. If you haven't seen this pattern, where have you been? They are all over social media. They are felted slippers, they're cute, they're cozy, and they're knit at a 12 stitch gauge, which means they work up really fast, making them ideal for gift knitting. Today I'm going to be timing myself to the second so you know exactly how long it takes to knit a pair. And then I'll be doing all the maths for you so you know exactly how many pairs you can knit before Christmas based on your lifestyle and the amount of time you have available to knit. I'm also going to be sharing all my tips and tricks so you can knit them as efficiently as possible. I learned a lot from my first pair. If you see my knitting podcast, you know that I'm never without them on my feet. I'm wearing them right now and I'm obsessed. Today's pair I will be knitting in these three colours. This yarn is Dropped Snow. It's the recommended yarn in the pattern. It's a chunky weight yarn and it's a really affordable 100% wool that is feltable. The colours are Dark Plum, Fog and Light Olive. These will be my stripes and this will be the sole. Okay, right, intro done. Let's relax and do some knitting. So my first tip is to knit both slippers at the same time. The great thing about this pattern is that you need 2 balls of each of the stripe colours for pretty much every size. If you love someone with massive feet, then you will need a 3rd ball of the main colour. I think that's just for the top 2 sizes. So for the majority of the slippers that you're knitting, you will have 1 ball of each colour for each slipper. And that means it's really easy to knit them both at the same time. It's completely up to you how you do this. I know some people like to knit socks 2 at a time on 1 cable. So you literally do like row for row, each one at the same time. I personally have broken this down into sections and I've knit the heel of my first slipper and I'm about to knit the heel of my second slipper. I will then knit the foot of the first slipper, the foot of the second slipper, and break it down as necessary. This pattern is knit on 8mm needles. They are by far the biggest needles I've ever used. I have them in my interchangeable set, so I already had them to hand, but they're a bit of an adjustment. It feels very clumsy and unnatural. I think up until now, the biggest I'd used is 6mm. So yeah, they just feel a lot bigger. I kind of feel like, you know, if you watch a TV show and there's someone there that's like meant to be knitting and they're just there like, and it's just not how you knit. It's kind of just like a weird background that I feel like I'm doing that. I feel like I'm not actually knitting. So it is a bit of an adjustment to get into the flow. So realistically, your first pair will probably be a bit slower than your second pair if you're making multiple, but yeah, you'll get used to it. I've done my cast on. Later in the pattern, you will be asked to place some stitch markers in the cast on edge. Now this could very much be a me problem, but I can't count, okay? I have a track record of not being able to count and I just find it easier to put the stitch markers into the cast on edge now rather than later. So yeah, tip 2, look slightly ahead towards the end of the heel part of the pattern and put the stitch markers in the appropriate location now instead of later if you too can't count. It looks like we're about to have some apocalyptic Yorkshire weather. I'm glad I've already taken the dog out. I have done both of my heels. This took 41 minutes and 53 seconds, which feels like a long time for 2 small heel flaps, but can't argue with the numbers, can I? Stats don't lie. My first one was about a minute and a bit slower than the second one, so efficiency gains. I'm now going to pick up stitches along the sides and cast on for the foot. The pattern obviously gives you the amount and the rate and what you should be picking up, but a tip is to make sure that you pick up the bottom and the top stitch from this piece, and that will just make seaming the sole and picking up for your I-cord a smoother experience later. A tip that I didn't mention is that the pattern obviously comes with 4 row stripes as recommended. The fun of this pattern is that you can play around with it. You can do 1 row stripes, you can make it solid. For your first pair, I recommend sticking with the 4 row stripe. It makes it very easy to keep track of the increases and decreases. The rate throughout the foot does like differ quite a lot. There's shaping for the left and the right, and the amount of rows just does make it easier to keep track of those. So if you struggle keeping track of your increases and decreases, stick with the 4 row stripes and I think you'll find it smoother, especially for your first one. If you want to change it up, then I recommend sticking with a multiple of 2, because then you can knit back and forth and keep your yarn on one side so that you can carry it up instead of having to cut each time, which again makes it quicker down the line because you don't have to weave in every single end, you don't have to cut your yarn between. So yeah, I'm about to do the foot for my first slipper. I now have 2 feet fully knitted. It took me an extra hour and a half to knit both of these. This is the point where you're finished with your first 2 colours. However, I'm going to use the burgundy to do the I-cord around the top here because I do have enough yarn to do that. I will now be moving on to knitting the sole. There's different shaping for the left and the right feet, and my tip is that you include letters so you know which feet they are. I just put a LUT in and I just like used a needle and put it on because it felts and it's inside anyway, but if you can't tell left and right, then you recommend that you do that. I have this olive green now for my soles. We have 2 soles. Each sole took me about 45 minutes to knit, so in total we're at about 3.5 hours now. Don't worry, I will give you an actual like deep dive into the numbers properly later. The next jobs I have to do are seaming all the way around the foot and then adding the I-cord to it. When it comes to seaming, in the pattern it tells you to make sure you twist your yarn whilst you're doing it. Do that, because otherwise it will snap. When I did my first one, it definitely snapped, so do that. And there are useful videos in the pattern where the designer goes through the whole process, so obviously watch those videos if you're not sure. And my tip is just, it's fine. Felting will hide all sins, okay? Within reason. So don't get too bogged down in it being perfect with your seaming, because at the end of the day you won't be able to see the stitches, they won't be defined anymore when they're felted. So yeah, it will hide your sins, and just do it. He's hilarious. They're long. I've seamed one and I've just started seaming my second slipper. I forgot to mention that I added additional stitch markers on my slipper to help with seaming. So what I did was, the number of rows that you have in the foot of the slipper, I got that amount and then used that number to put a marker the exact same amount of rows up on the sole. And that means that when you're seaming, you know that you're on track. Obviously it doesn't have to be perfect, you know, you're felting it, it'd be great, but just means that it makes it a bit easier for you to keep track of your seaming and make sure that you've got like your ratios right for the different parts of the foot. I also am using a large needle with a big hoop, and that makes it a lot easier. The dog's shaking his head. That makes it a lot easier to thread, and if it falls out when you're doing like weaving in ends in particular and you have to keep putting it back on, it's just much quicker. I have also woven my ends using big needle. So silly. My slipper knitting is done and now I'm going to felt them, and my tip for you with the felting is just don't overthink it. I was like so worried about this felting process and I was overthinking it, and honestly in the end I just whacked them in the dishwasher. No, don't whack them in the dishwasher. I whacked them in the washing machine. I put them on like a mixed cycle. I think it was an hour 20, 40 degrees and 1400, maybe 1200 spins, and they came out perfect. If they aren't felted enough, put them back in. If they're too felted, stretch them out whilst they're wet. I promise it's not that intimidating. Hopefully these ones go as well as my first pair did. So let's go and wash them. Hi, it's Saturday. My husband's taking my daughter for a play date. I've got myself a coffee, I've put my cozies on, and I can catch up with you and report back that I have finished my sailor slippers. They are knitted, they are sewn together, and they are felted, and they are perfect, even more so than my first pair. I'm obviously going to give you the breakdown of how long it took me to knit this, some final tips for you. If you struggle with picking up stitches evenly and consistently and you aren't necessarily perfect at doing that, when I did my first pair, one of the foot hole I-cords was tighter than the other, so I guess I picked up more stitches on one foot, less on the other foot, and it just meant that I had to stretch it out when it was wet. This one, I really took my time to make sure I got every stitch. I had stitch markers here between the heel panel and the front cast on, which helped as well with that, and I made sure I counted and did the same for the second foot. If that's something you struggle with, you can pick up all the stitches and do your I-cord that way. You don't have to just pick them up one at a time. So if you want to pick them all up and know your number, know you've got them all, just do it. It might take you a little bit longer, but I think it'll be worth it if it is something that you're worried about. I forgot to add that when these come out of the washing machine, they're very scrumpled and tight, and you have to kind of shape them to your foot. And even though it's disgusting and incredibly uncomfortable, I recommend putting your foot in them to kind of help mold them to your foot and what size you need, and give them that bit of shape. Obviously you don't have to wear them the entire time that they're drying. That would be, you might get trench foot, but yeah, do that and just give them a bit of a flex and get your foot in there and then leave them to dry, because that will give them a nice shape that you want instead of them staying scrumpled and weird like that. My final tip, which you've probably already gathered if you've seen my podcast, is use the grippy stuff. These are slippy, okay? I have hard floors, there's tiles in the kitchen, there's fake wood through the whole downstairs, and I have fallen over in it. I've played lots of really fun games, dragging my daughter around in them, that's been really fun, but they are definitely a safety hazard. And since I'm currently modding a pair that are going to be smaller for my daughter, I want them to be safe for her to, run feral in. So when it says you can use that sticky, grippy, gooey juice, do it, okay? Keep yourself safe. So let's talk about how long it took me to knit these. I've written it all down because I have the memory of a rock. I don't know. Do rocks have memories? I have a terrible memory, okay? So I've written it all down, but briefly, you should know that my second slipper was consistently faster than the first slipper. Totals: heel, 41 minutes, 53 seconds. Foot, 1 hour, 29 and 43 seconds. Soles, 1 hour, 32 and 28 seconds. Seaming, 53 minutes, 52 seconds. Or was that 55? That's 55 minutes, 52 seconds. I have bad handwriting as well as not being able to remember anything. I'm a catch. I-cords, 32 minutes, 42 seconds. And weaving in my ends, 40 minutes, 33 seconds. The grand total, 5 hours, 27 minutes and 11 seconds. What does that mean for your Christmas knitting plans? If these take you approximately 5.5 hours to knit, how many pairs can you knit between now and Christmas? I've done the maths for you. I want to say that I did also time myself knitting the second slipper in my first pair, and that was slightly slower than this one. I'll put the numbers on the screen here because this is where the gap is. For context of my knitting, I am an English style flicker, so I flick with my finger like this, but when I'm doing purl rows I do tend to throw. So obviously if you knit continental or you do Norwegian, Portuguese purling or whatever type you do, it might be slightly different timings for you, but that's context for my knitting. I started knitting 8 months ago, so I've knit quite a lot, but I'm still like a relatively new knitter, beginner, you know, I'm a beginner who wants to knit everything and anything I can and learn a lot, but I'm still new to knitting. So again, if you've been knitting for longer, it might be quicker. These took me in total days. I was knitting them for 4 days, whereas the first pair that I did was like within 24 hours. So again, differences there. I knit UK size 6, which is the 4th size in the pattern. Obviously, if you're knitting a smaller size, it might be a bit quicker. If you're knitting a bigger size, it might be a bit slower. But I think size 6 is a pretty good reference for a pretty average woman's foot size. 5.5 hours is 330 minutes, and if we've got, how many weeks have we got between now and Christmas? About 6. I'm gonna say 5 because you need time to felt them, you need time to dry them, you need time to wrap them and get them to their recipient. Let's say 5 weeks between November 17th and December 20th-ish. Look at your calendar. That's 10 minutes of knitting every day for you to do 1 pair before Christmas. If you want to knit 6 pairs, that's an hour of knitting a day to knit your slippers. I promised myself that I wasn't going to do any gift knitting this year and that I was just gonna take it easy, knit things for me, but I do think I want to knit some slippers for my husband. I've already started a pair for my daughter. I've been changing the pattern to make it fit her little baby size 10 UK kids EU 28 feet. So I've been doing some, you know, back of the crisp packet maths to work out what sort of size to make for them to fit her, which is fun. And then I do want to make some for my best friends. There's 3, I guess, that I am willing to knit for, but I think we'll probably do something in January with them, so I can kind of get away with not having to just do it in the lead up to Christmas. I hate knitting with a deadline. I want to just knit what I want when I want. Hopefully that's given you a bit of context as to how long it will take you, whether or not you can realistically knit these for as many people as you want to, and it will also help you with planning and actually delivering these on time, because all of your friends and family are going to be so grateful when they get these cozy slippers.